Welcome to another week in the Christian education program for adults in Grace United Methodist Church in Winfield, Kansas. This week we're climbing the fifth and final flight of stairs of understanding, which are essential in the preparation for study and reading the books in the library. First, we looked at the United Methodist understanding. Secondly, was the understanding of the complexity of language. Third is the understanding that the Bible disagrees with itself. And last week, that for followers of Jesus, all the library is studied and read through the lens of Jesus. This week, we explore the understanding that since we're on the top flight of stairs, we can look in and see that there's three separate and distinct stacks in the library. This is very, very important. There are three separate and distinct stacks in the library. Now, most of us have grown up with an understanding that the library is one book, and therefore the distinct and separate nature of the components are not considered. But it's an important understanding. We began this 5-week journey of understanding the library with the story of a person who cannot play golf in his country until he took a class and passed a test to be sure you understand the game of golf before you play it. I've borrowed this story to emphasize that persons of faith need to understand what the library is before it is studied and read. You see, without this understanding, the library can, and in many cases has become, the most misused library in human history. On the other hand, with this understanding, the library is the most beautiful and revealing resource exploring the nature of planet Earth with humanity and the divine, the interrelationship of planet Earth, humanity, and the divine. Indeed, these are the components of the created order. And the Bible becomes the most wonderful resource to consider that relationship of planet Earth, humanity, and the divine. So this week, we are at the top of the stairs and we look in and see three separate stacks of books. Now, the first stack is commonly known as the Old Testament. It is best referred to as the library of the Hebrew people, those of the Jewish faith. The books in this stack were written over a period of 800 years, ending in 160 BC. The 39 books in this stack were officially identified as the books of the Hebrew library at the Council of the Sanhedrin, the official leadership of the Jewish community towards the end of the 1st century AD. See, there wasn't an Old Testament for Jesus to read. There were just writings. The Old Testament didn't exist until 2 generations after the death of Jesus. Now, the reason why books written after 160 BC were not included is that the Sanhedrin determined that the Roman Empire and the Maccabean rule in the Roman Empire was the source of contamination of the Hebrew people, which eventually led to the destruction of the temple by the Romans in 70 AD. It was the judgment of the Sanhedrin that books written after the Maccabean rule in the Roman Empire was established, they were contaminated and not representative of the Hebrew people and life. Now, next week, we'll continue our journey for a few weeks of exploration of the Hebrew library. Now, the second stack is named the Apocrypha. Now, this stack can best be described as the books written between the writing of the books of the Old and the New Testaments. These books were written and describe the life of the Hebrew people for a 200-year period between 169, 170 BC and 50 AD. That was the approximate date of the first New Testament writings. This stack is unique in that the Roman Catholic Church considers these 15 books of the Apocrypha as fully and truly Scripture. In other words, the Roman Catholic Library includes these 15 books, whereas in the Protestant tradition, these books are not considered as Scripture and are considered to be of secondary importance. We're going to examine the books in the Apocrypha after our journey into the Hebrew Bible, because these books bridge the gap between the Old and New Testaments, and they offer insights into the political, cultural, ethical, and religious life of the contemporaries of Jesus. Now, the third stack is commonly known as the New Testament. It's the library of the Christian community. The books in this stack were written between 50 AD and 110 AD. These 27 books became official in 325. Until this time, the Christian community was a movement. It wasn't really that organized, more an affiliation of like-minded persons. But when the Roman emperor became a believer, the Roman Catholic Church was launched and the official list of books was set as the Jesus movement became the official religion of the empire. Now, in this period of time of 300 years, there were a lot of different lists of the official books in the New Testament. Many of the books were in every list, but some books were in and out or out and in. But in 325 AD, since that time, there's been no change in the list of the 27. Again, following our journey in looking at the Old Testament stack and the Apocrypha stack, we'll look at the Christian library. As we consider these stacks in our library, some understandings are important and become clear. First, no author or authors wrote their narrative with the intent of being in any list. The purpose of writing was to preserve their story or the story of their people as a part of their identity. Second, the library is the book of the church. Leaders of the faith community selected these books. The library is the consequence of human endeavor. It is the library of the church. Third, these books, when selected, were considered by the leaders of separate faith communities to be divinely inspired but not divinely written. Fourth, when these books were selected, they were selected because they were determined to be forever relevant, not time-bound to one age or audience-bound for one community. They were considered to be unbound by time and universal in nature. As we consider these three stacks in our library in the coming weeks, it is important to remember the Hebrew library contains only the books approved by the Sanhedrin, and the books that they approved were only the books written in original Hebrew. The Roman Catholic Library includes the Hebrew Library and the Apocrypha and the Christian Library. The Protestant Library includes the Hebrew Library and the Christian Library without the Apocrypha. Indeed, as we prepare to study and read in each of these stacks, we must honor the separate and distinctive nature of all three stacks. For your conversation and thought, what new insights have you experienced as we have climbed these 5 flights of stairs leading up to the library? The stairs of understanding. And what is your response to the understanding that the three stacks are unique in content and in purpose? Thank you for being a part of our journey, and it'll continue next week.